Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 172. Why pay $1 for a bookmark? Why not use the dollar for your bookmark? Steven Speilberg.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Film Convert. Film Convert I used heavily on creating the cinematic look I got on my film, This Is Meg. It helps you give your digital video footage a beautiful cinematic look of film instantly. Whether you're shooting on a GoPro, a DSLR, a Red, an Alexa, a Blackmagic, it doesn't matter. Film Convert has created specific camera profiles for almost every camera on the planet so it can adjust to your footage. Film Convert gives you the power to create amazing looking cinematic images with just a couple clicks. And of course, because you guys are part of the Indie Film Hustle tribe, you get 10% off Film Convert by using the coupon code HUSTLE. But you can try this software for free, guys. Just head over to indiefilmhustle.com/film convert. That's indiefilmhustle.com/film, CONVERT. This show is also sponsored by the iTunes release of This Is Meg, the movie that you guys have been listening about for the past year. And it's finally going to be available on iTunes on August 4th. Just head over to thisismeg.com/iTunes. And if you pre-order it, you get a nice discount before August 4th and be the first one to get it as soon as it gets released. So today's guest is Pat Healy. Pat is a pretty remarkable filmmaker who also is an actor and has over 100 IMDb credits as an actor and has worked with directors like P.T. Anderson, the Duplass Brothers, and most recently, this little guy known as, I think it's Steven Speilberg, I think he calls him, on Steven Spielberg's new film, The Papers, starring Tom Hanks. So the guy's been around some amazing talent in his life, and he is a first-time director with his new movie, Take Me, which stars Orange is the New Black's Taylor Schilling, and it's available on Netflix, and it was sold to Netflix by the Duplass Brothers for their 4-picture or 3-picture deal that they have going on with Netflix. So Pat was a very interesting guy, and I wanted to get him on the show to talk to him a little bit about his process as a filmmaker, what made him jump into the directing chair after a very successful career and still successful career as a director, how it was like working with, legends like Steven Spielberg and P.T. Anderson, and what was it like to work with the Duplass Brothers as producers, and how Netflix treated him throughout this entire process. So without any further ado, here is my conversation with Pat Healy. I'd like to welcome to the show Pat Healy, man. Thank you so much for jumping on, man.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
I appreciate it, man. And I first and foremost, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into the business?
I always loved movies. I mean, my parents were big movie fans, and I have 3 brothers. We all love the movies. I knew that I wanted to make movies and be part of movies. Acting was something that I knew how to do at a very early age, and did plays in school, and ended up doing plays in high school, and then going to college for theater. But when I graduated from college, I went to Illinois State University down in Normal, Illinois. I grew up in suburban Chicago. Mm-hmm. And they had an internship at Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago, which is a huge regional theater company where people like John Malkovich and Gary Sinise and Joan Allen and
never heard of any of them.
Yeah, exactly. Bunch of nobodies. So that theater company actually started at my college, my university. And so they offered an internship for graduating senior every year, which I did. I got that internship when I graduated. And that sort of brought me right into the business. I did all of the dirty work there. I worked on the crew. I helped build sets. I lifted a porta potty up and down flights of stairs in the rehearsal space.
Oh, that must have been fun.
Yeah, but I also was able to audition for every play there. And I got cast as an understudy a few times during my year-long internship, and I went on when somebody wasn't available one night. And then as soon as I finished my internship, I got cast in my first play there. Mm-hmm. And the sort of prestige that was connected with Steppenwolf got me an agent. A small agency. They were a big agency in Chicago, but I started doing, while I was doing theater and working as a waiter in Chicago for about 5 years, whatever television and movies came through town and commercials and things like that, industrial videos. And then my agency had an office in LA, a small office. And I moved there in '98, and that's really how I got started. I do believe in working hard and in trying to be as good a person as you can. But there is a certain amount of luck that's involved that a lot of people don't acknowledge. But I was just lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. That old story.
I've heard that from interviewing so many people over the years. I've talked to multiple people saying the same things, like, look, I was at the right place at the right time. If that situation happened today, I don't know if I would make it in the same way.
I'd like to help, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this. People get, trying to break into the business and how to do well, but I really don't know the answer to that question in a lot of ways. It's such a different business now.
Oh God, isn't it?
If I would, had the opportunities that I, have had then now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, if you're going down the directing path, I mean, the opportunity that opened itself up in the 70s for the Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, De Palma, that crowd, that wasn't around in the 60s or the 50s.
Yeah, it was a much smaller business, too, at that time.
Exactly.
It was possible for Steven Spielberg to, make his way, sneak onto the Universal lot and, find a job directing TV and then directing a very successful television movie and then directing a feature film, and then the second one he does is the biggest movie ever. So
he did all right. He came out all right.
Yeah, he came out all right. So yeah, it's hard if we're going to be analogous to our current times. I'm not sure there is much of an analogy, but I bet we can find some.
But I think also there's opportunities now that that generation would have killed for, like distribution, like Netflix or something like that. There's opportunities. It's just how to maneuver. It's always easier to look back and say, oh, I could have done that back then. But when you're in the soup, it's tough to see what's going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, not to name drop, but I'm working with Spielberg now, and he talks about wanting to be around when William Wyler and John Ford were around. So
right. So since you've brought him up, what do you work? Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with Mr. Spielberg?
Sure. Yeah, I'm in a movie that he's doing called The Papers, which is about the Pentagon Papers, which were these documents, secret documents that the Rand Corporation developed that talked about the plans for Vietnam War going back to the 40s. That helped end the Vietnam War. They were initially published by the New York Times, and then the Nixon White House put a gag order on the Times, and the Washington Post sort of got a hold of this guy, Daniel Ellsberg, who was the one who had given the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times. And it was a big court battle, that went all the way to the Supreme Court to publish them. And this is just about those, I guess, few days when all this is happening. And Tom Hanks plays Ben Bradley, who's the editor of the Washington Post, and yes, and Meryl Streep is Catherine Graham, who is the owner, the publisher of the paper, it's just
so you must
be remarkable opportunity.
I was gonna say, you must be absolutely in heaven walking around that set.
Well, I'm in an ensemble of people, and there are many days when I don't quote unquote have much to do,
Uh-huh.
But I'm there,
Oh, sure.
and I've been happy to have been asked to be a lamp in this movie.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Quite frankly, I would be the exact same thing.
Yeah, so I'm getting to watch,
Masters.
my heroes, the masters' work, and I'm getting to be a part of it. It is really just a bonus for me.
Have you picked up any little tricks of the trade from Mr. Spielberg?
Well, I mean, everything he does is quite remarkable. I mean, without saying too much, I think that even just to watch him, stand behind the monitor and watch him, I guess I can learn, but mostly I'm just sort of astonished at how, not only intuitive, but how skilled he is at. I mean, he will move the camera a millimeter, to the right, and the frame will suddenly become more beautiful, and he will, have an extra, white frame behind just a half a second later, and you see the improvement. You see how much better it is. He just knows, his taste is impeccable. He just knows what is right. So, if anything, I guess I could say that it's just, you should always be open to learning. And he's always, surprising himself and coming up with new things with us. But just trusting your instinct and your taste. I think if you believe that you're skilled at what you do, then trusting that, intuitive sense about what feels right and what looks right.
So then what made you, after doing 20 odd years of being an actor, what made you want to jump into the director's chair?
Well, it just is strange that I hadn't done it before, to be honest with you. Like I said, I did acting because it was what I knew how to do. And it was something that the door was open to me for. The 80s, becoming a director wasn't as something as accessible as it is now. You couldn't make a movie on a phone. I mean, we had Super 8 camera, but video cameras really didn't even come into play until I was in high school, and we really didn't have one. Our family couldn't afford that. I had friends who had one, and so I was just acting, and I made my first short film called Mullet, which got into Sundance.
Nice.
And this is so long ago that I shot it on 35 millimeter. I cut it on an Avid. I made prints of it. I cut negative. I made a print. All that stuff. And then the question was, this is great. What do you have? What's your script? And I just really wasn't a writer. I had written a short, but I hadn't written a feature film script. So I spent 5 years on and off writing a script that was based on the short that I had made, and not really getting anywhere with it. But I think what I was doing was sort of teaching myself how to write without knowing it. I mean, just spending, at least some part of every day writing. And the next thing that I wrote was a script called Snow Ponies, which I put the other thing down, and I wrote the script in 2 weeks based on a little short one-line idea that a friend of mine had, a Western on little horses. And that script, it was one of those, again, another right place, right, and who had been the cameraman on the first indie movie I made when I moved to LA in 98, who had married a German woman and moved to Berlin for many years, had come back. His father was a literary agent. He went to go to work for his father. He bumped into me at a party. He remembered my short, asked if I had written anything. I gave him the script that I had written based on the short. he said, "This is okay. Have you written anything else?" I said, "The only other thing I've written is this thing that I wrote this in like 2 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
He loved that. They wanted to represent me. They sent the script out in, I guess, Labor Day of 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And on that weekend, and on Tuesday, the phone just never stopped ringing. And there were several attempts to get the movie made, but what it did was it opened up this career for me as a writer. By the spring of the next year, I was in the Writers Guild. I was being paid huge sums of money to adapt a book. I was
awesome.
a writer. I became a writer for, pretty much full time for 10 years. And it allowed me to ease off on the kind of acting that I had been doing, which was mostly TV guest stars and small parts in movies. And
Mm-hmm.
I was making money writing. And that's when these indie movies that I had become known for, because they were able to cast me in larger roles, happened. And I was able to do those because I was making money with the writing. So Great World of Sound with Craig Zobel, which
Mm-hmm.
then was followed, that was 2007, and that was followed by The Innkeepers with Ty West and Compliance with Zobel again. And then Cheap Thrills following that. And then from there, now I have a name as an actor. And, people can put a name to the face. And this opportunity to direct something that I had written, I had never written anything. I had a dozen scripts, but nothing that was quote unquote micro budget, nothing that anyone was going to give me money to direct.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still acting. I was acting a lot more. I acted in a short film with a group of Brown University graduates, one of whom was this young man named Mike Mikowski, who was the producer on the short. And he and I became friends. And this was, late, 2014. And by the summer, he had written a script. He gave it to me for me to act in. I read it, and I said, I'm going to direct this. It had not occurred to me to direct something I hadn't written, but I had never written a micro-budgeted script before, and this was something that I could conceivably do for, a few, $100,000. And I impressed that idea on him, and he was a little wary of it because I wanted to act and direct in it. Yeah.
What?
And then I to legitimize it, I called some friends of mine who are, big time indie film producers, one of whom was Jay Duplass.
Yeah. I was going to ask about the Duplasses, of course.
Yeah. Jay and Mark, I knew from, it's a pretty small world when you get down to it, the independent world. And I knew them from around. I was a fan of their work. They had been, a fan of mine. Sent them the script. They sent it to their producer, Mel Eslin, who Mel had recently, been assigned to direct this, to produce these, movies for them because they're so busy, off doing their other things and, acting in other shows and stuff like that. And they had their television series for HBO. And I met with her the next day, and she said, well, let's do this. And, that's like a 20-year overnight success.
Exactly.
Like, either it happens for you, in a way where one way or another, it takes that long usually for most people. It happened right away, but it happened after this is, basically 15 years of me trying to direct a movie. So, but once it happened right away. And that was August. And by April we were shooting.
That's absolutely, it's an insane story, but it's very true. It's kind of like, you're trying to get the opportunity to lift that tree for the town, and you never get the opportunity, but you work out for 20 years. And by the time you get to that tree, you can lift it because you've been 20 years preparing for that moment. And it's just that the doggedness of doing it day in, day out, good days, bad days, just showing up. And that's, I think that's the key. The persistence, I think, is the key to any success in any career is persistence. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
I would agree.
Acting, directing, writing, it's just sitting down and doing it and doing the work.
Well, and even talking about luck, I mean, the longer you hang in there and the more you're around, the more opportunities you're going to have to be lucky,
Right.
The more you're going to be in the right place at the right time because it's been enough,
Eventually you could... Right. Eventually you could just sit down and write in a cabin in the woods, but if you don't get out there and do something, you can't. Like I always tell people, if you want to get hit by a car, you got to step into traffic.
Exactly.
So how was it working with Jay and Mark? I mean, I've had multiple guests on who've worked with both of those guys, and they're a huge inspiration to me with Puffy Chair, and I did my first feature film kind of based on their model of a scriptment and all that kind of stuff. So how was it working with them as far as on a creative standpoint?
Well, I mean, obviously starting with, the story I just told you was a confidence in me based on, we don't know each other that well. It just was, and I had never directed anything other than this short, which quite frankly, I don't know that they had seen. It was the material and what they knew of me and that I knew movies and my sensibilities. So that gave me a lot of confidence in myself to do it. I mean, I remember saying at that first meeting with Mel, I can not act in it or not direct it, if you guys feel like that would be a better way to go about it. And she said, no, we very much feel like this is a good idea for you. So it starts with that confidence in you. And then they have great access to talent because they've developed these great personal and professional relationships with so many people. So, for example, with the script Snow Ponies that I was telling you about, which was on the blacklist in 2006, and it looks like it's going to get made finally now, 11 years later. This coming
overnight success.
Well, exactly. 12 years in the making there, in the not making, I should say. You give it to agents give it to directors or talent, and you try to attach those people. And a lot of it is political. It's harder to just get a read out of people, especially if it's challenging material. With Mark and Jay, I mean, you go through the agent, but they can also call, these people and say, hey, we have this great project. We have this great script. We think this would be a good part for you. And we like this guy. We like this director. We think you should talk to him. And, they had a list of actresses that all of whom I would have been, lucky to have. And Taylor Schilling was somebody that I just thought was the best person for the part. And we did some rewriting with Mel and Mark and the writer, Mike. And, over a few months, Jay was busy with Transparent. So Mark kind of came in and then we had a script that we felt confident in giving to Taylor, which was probably in, I want to say, late October, early November, starting in August. And she said yes right away. So, so much of the burden was alleviated because of their reputation and what people think of their work and what people think of them personally. And so that part was easy, and putting together a crew, the sort of system that they work on with, they pay everybody well, but they also give everyone who works on the movie a point or a fraction of a point.
Can you say that one more time? You just broke up for a second. Can you say that one more time?
Oh, sure. they give everyone who works on the movie, every member of the crew, a point or a fraction of a percentage point on the movie on the back end.
Wow.
But they also pay well to start off. So it's not like you don't have to starve to shoot it. You don't have to like I got paid a regular rate, to direct and act in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I have these points in the back end on the sale. And I knew that they had these deals with Netflix and the Orchard so that the, kind of worst case scenario was that we were, and it's not a bad scenario at all, is that we could sell the movie to Netflix and we would see that money.
Right.
So then we shot, and I was really left alone. I mean, I had the support of Mel, who was on set every day, and particularly because I was acting in the movie, she was really very much my eyes and ears, and there wasn't a lot of time to stop and look at the monitor. And I had been working on the part for 8 months at that point, so I felt I knew it really well. And then I'm sure we'll go back and talk about some of these other aspects, but then we got into post, and then they were all very much involved while we cut. And we cut, we shot for 18 days, but we cut not every day, but we cut for 4 months. And it was it was a long and often difficult process of working on it with my editor, Brian Schofield, and then showing it to groups of people, anywhere from 10 to 20 people, and getting notes and feedback and sending links to friends of theirs, other filmmakers, other people whose opinion they trusted, getting ideas, what didn't work, even doing rewriting in the editing stage and changing things and moving things around. And they were very involved with that, but they were never, in a way, it was always my movie. It was never, let's make this or anything like that. It was always to, support my vision. Certainly, the most involved they were was we had a common interest, which was to make a movie that appealed to as many people as possible.
Of course.
I'm not trying to make Transformers, but I'm also not trying to make
My Dinner with Andre.
or Eraserhead.
Right.
I want to make something that is, anything that I make is going to be unique and have an oddball sensibility to it, because that's who I am. But I want it to be accessible. I think this movie was different from most other movies they made. I mean, I guess in a way it's similar to Safety Not Guaranteed, or
but this one seems a little bit more but this one seems a little bit more screwball than those guys.
Yeah, I mean it's thematically and stylistically different, but I just meant in the sense of it's not an improvised movie. It's not a sort of verite style handheld camera movie. It's more like those narrative movies. But yeah, this movie is. I'm very interested in cinema. I mean, I'm a cinephile. I wanted to make. I sort of diagnosed these two genres that it was a mixture of screwball comedy and film noir. And
well, before we keep going, I mean, because we kept talking about your directorial, and it just kind of went into the movie, but we haven't even mentioned the name of the movie or what the movie's about.
Oh, sure. Well, the movie is called Take Me.
Okay.
It's about a guy named Ray Moody who runs a small boutique kidnapping for hire business.
Yes.
If you want to be kidnapped for fun or therapeutic reasons, you hire him, and he does this. And
please tell me, does this exist?
Not that I know of. I've heard rumblings of things. I mean, when I read the script, I thought, wow, this is really interesting idea. There's certainly these role-playing, real-life role-playing games, Blackout and, This to Sleep No More in New York and things like that. And I have heard that there are versions of things that contain stuff like this, but I certainly wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
So yeah, he gets he's not doing very well, and he gets a call from Anna St. Blair, who's a character that Taylor Schilling plays, who is a very high-powered, successful businesswoman.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And she asks him to do things that he's not that comfortable with, but he really needs the money. And there's a certain allure to her, of course, for him. And she really makes him work for his money over a really long weekend. This is, I guess, the best way I can say it.
Now, let me see how I get. Now, did Netflix come in before or after the production?
They came in after. I mean, I knew that Mark and Jay had the relationship with them, and they had a deal to make. I think it was 4 movies with them, but we always had the option to do whatever we liked with it. They came in post. I have a bit of a relationship with them and with Ian Brick, who works for the movie division over there. He is a fan of mine. He had been wanting to do something with me. Obviously, Taylor, being the star of Orange is the New Black, is one of their flagship shows. That helped. And so when we were in post, when they had read the script and they saw what we had done, and they said, we'll do this, and we got. It was the second movie in this deal. The first was Blue Jay, which wrote and starred in with Sarah Paulson.
Yeah, and Alex was on the show.
Alex Lehman.
Yeah, he was on the show. It was. I love that movie. I thought it was really wonderful.
Yeah, it's very good. And so that was in conjunction with The Orchard. They got a little bit of a theatrical VOD window before it went to Netflix, and then we got. I think a little bit more of one. They're sort of testing this out, see how this model works. So we got a little bit longer. Our movie played in some theaters in New York and LA, and I went around the country. We premiered at Tribeca. I did some screenings, in the Midwest and in LA, and then we're on VOD, we're on iTunes and Amazon and. Google Play and YouTube and all those things now, and then we'll be on Netflix sometime soon, sometime later this summer.
Yeah, because Orange and New Black just came out today, actually.
That's right.
Yeah, so I'm sure they're going to want to piggyback that a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that. We're coming soon. I don't know when, but
now, what did you shoot on, by the way?
I was shot on Arri Alexa, but I shot with. I wanted to make it as cinematic as possible, and knowing that it's always possible that I might not ever direct a movie again, or might not want to, or might not get the chance to direct ever again. I wanted to shoot with anamorphic lenses, and we were lucky enough to have a relationship with Panavision, who set us up. So that really gave it. A cinematic quality.
It looks great. The trailer looked awesome.
Nate Miller, who was my DP, and I worked, exhaustively testing these lenses out, and they're old lenses. They're old Japanese lenses that Panavision retrofitted, and that it has a great quality to it. And then when you get into the
do you happen to know
color timing and stuff? You can add the film grain and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you?
I do. Yeah. They're called Cineovision.
Oh yeah. I've heard of those. Yes.
Yeah. So Cineovision is a Japanese version of, I'm trying to think of the
like VistaVision.
No, they're the ones that Vittorio Storaro uses them a lot. He shot Apocalypse Now on them and The Last Emperor, and
they're gorgeous glass.
Yeah, Luc Besson shot a lot of those movies like The Professional and those movies. They have a little bit more of a Panavision kind of has the patent on the de-squeezing technology. And these ones have a little bit more of a bend to them around the corners, and they have kind of like a funhouse mirror quality to them, which I thought lended itself well to this movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're similar to those lenses. I can't think of the name of what the Cinevisions are an offshoot of, but I'm sure I'll think of it at one point. But yeah, they're beautiful. They're widescreen lenses. The image is squeezed and then de-squeezed in post, and you get as opposed to being just your standard. God, I keep losing my words now.
Widescreen, like a standard widescreen.
Yeah, maybe you'll edit this in a way to make me sound like less of a dummy. I'm like trying to look it up now to
Don't worry about it.
A spherical, the other lenses are spherical, the 1.85 lenses. These are more, these are wider and thinner. Mm-hmm. It's really nice to see it in a theater, because on a television, which is, is or a computer is how most people are going to see it. The wider vision gets smaller, but when you see it in a big theater, the screen opens up and gets wider and bigger, and I love seeing it that way.
When I projected my feature on in a huge monster theater at a festival, it's a very magical experience.
It is. In a way, it's kind of nice that it happens, only a few times for a movie like this, because it's so sacred in a way.
Mm-hmm.
You want people to be watching it, especially since this movie is a comedy. For the most part, it's great to be sitting in there and hearing people laugh. But you have those, I don't know what I've had at 10 or so times where I've got to sit in a theater and watch this movie, with a packed house and on the big screen and loud sound, and I really cherish that. Because, like I said, I don't know if I'll do it again. We'll see.
Which brings me to my next question. Why did you choose to act in your directorial debut?
It's a really great question. It was a really stupid idea. I guess the easy answer is that I chose to act in it first because I love the part. Mm-hmm. And then I was speaking to my friend Evan Catt, director, and in such an animated way that he said, "Sounds like you should direct it." And it sounded like a great idea. And I really I over prepared in a good way beforehand with my DP, with all my key crew people, so that on the day I could just be acting. And I had no problem with the pre-production of the shooting. Maybe I was a little more tired than I might normally be, but I was very energized and I felt very good about the work. Where it became difficult was in post,
right?
Where you're going into a room every day and looking at your face and listening to your voice.
Oh my God.
That's where it becomes torturous. I really am not that in love with myself. I'm not that much of a narcissist. I'm not going to say I'm not one at all, but I'm not I don't know how people like Mel Gibson or Kevin Costner do that.
I just do occasional interviews or YouTube videos with myself, and I got to edit them, and I'm like, oh God, it's brutal. Ugh, it's brutal.
No, I know. There's that movie, Albert Brooks movie, Defending Your Life.
I love that movie. Oh,
yeah. I'm convinced that movie is now based on his experience of editing himself and having to look at himself every day and judge himself and have other people weigh in. And it's this incredibly intense, personal experience. And
what a great movie.
It's masochistic, really.
It really is.
But, now that it's done, it's just I really have this great sense of confidence of having climbed that mountain. I know I could do it. Mm-hmm. I did it. I do think I was the best person for the part. Certainly other actors that could have done it, I'm sure would have been great, but I'm happy that I did it. The hard part of having done it is over and behind me. And I probably wouldn't do it again if unless, somebody said, we love that you direct and act in your own movies. And I decided to become an Albert Brooks or a Woody Allen or whatever.
Could we only pray? We could all pray to do so.
I guess, but I think if I did this again, I wouldn't act in it, or I might give myself a juicy little couple of scenes or one big scene or something like that. But I think next time, I think it would be, I don't think I did a worse job than I would have done if I'd just been directing it.
Right. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
But I just feel like I would enjoy the experience more next time if I just fully decided to just direct it.
Now, what advice would you give a filmmaker jumping into the business?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you want to be a filmmaker, I think you really have to be a writer. Mm-hmm. I think that, I was lucky to come by a great piece of material, but you see how long it took me. I think if you start writing early, and, it's like anything else, that 10,000 hour rule, you do it long enough, you're going to come up with something good that you can shoot. Or just write, and, it's so cheap to shoot something in some way. Mm-hmm. If you have a good phone, you really don't need a big crew or lights or anything like that. And start trying things out, and, start seeing like what your aesthetic is and all that stuff. I mean, that's one thing. I think the biggest piece of advice is just to watch a lot of movies. I mean, watch old movies, watch all the movies that people say are great, whether you suffer through them or not. And,
right.
Watch bad movies, my life has just been watching movies, and sometimes some of those over and over again, the point where, things like framing and, editing, the way things are edited, way performances are constructed, the way music is used, the way, so on and so on, is so intuitive to me. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen these things over and over again, and sometimes the same movies and sometimes in different movies, and what works in these movies that I really love, what recurs in these movies that I love, what's something that, recurs in Citizen Kane and E.T. and,
Transformers.
Yeah. Like what are I think that there are things that people keep doing because they work. And then, on top of that is your voice and your vision. And you can break the rules or bend the rules, but you really should know the basic, I think, structure of classical cinema before you go out there and try and do something new. I mean, what I'm basically trying to do with this movie is a modern take on old genres. I mean, what would a screwball comedy be like now? Well, it would probably involve some S&M and be much darker, and
right.
And things like that. I think that what works. And there are lots of filmmakers out now because it is easy to make a movie in some ways, or certainly easier than it's ever been, who aren't as focused on the writing. And sometimes that works, but I don't personally find those movies as interesting, and they don't stay with me as much. I think story is still kind of king, when it comes to this stuff. Doesn't mean you strictly adhere to some predictable 3-act structure or anything like that. It's just that there's a reason that stuff works. There's a reason that certain editing tricks always work,
because they work.
It worked, and you can take off from there.
I mean, you could argue like, well, I don't want to hit that nail on the hammer like everybody else does. I'm like, well, but that way works.
I mean, the thing is like, I think my movie is, very unpredictable and very surprising and makes people laugh. But, there's times in the editing room where, like where we screened it for people and they just did not and this is not a discredit to an audience. It's just like they didn't. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like a man who, you know, we realize is a loser in the first scene, drives to a party. He walks in. He sees a woman speaking to another man. He waves to her. She looks at him dismissively. He's playing with some kids at the backyard. And then he tries to speak to the woman, and she again is dismissive of him, and he leaves. And everyone that saw the movie thought that was my ex-wife, and I was a deadbeat dad. Well, she's my sister. And it was just kind of basic cinematic language that people just assumed that was the case.
Right.
And we went back and we recorded a voicemail from the sister that plays over me driving to the party. Hey, this is your sister.
Right.
Yeah, you know, and you know, are you coming to the party? And we also had this problem with, because I wear a really bad toupee in the movie, which
yes, fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. I never was trying to fool people into thinking that was my bad. I mean, it was a $30 wig that I picked out of a store.
Yeah, it looks pretty bad.
but people thought, because we were a low budget movie.
Oh, come on!
No, this.
No.
I mean, this is people watching the early cut. You know,
right?
Oh no! Like, are we supposed to? You know, what does he think we're doing? And you know, it doesn't get knocked off till late in the movie. So in that same ADR thing where we did the voicemail, we have her make a reference to my wig, and we also we now. So we're telling the audience, you know, without them knowing, we're kind of slipping in. They just always assume that phone conversation was there, that voicemail was there, and we give two very important pieces of information. We tell, you know, we're sort of saying, like, it's that old sketch, you know, I'm going to put this vase on this ladder in front of this door. I hope no one walks through it, you know.
Right.
But if you don't do it in that broad a way and you sort of slip it in, people really appreciate that. They may, if they know that you're doing that to them, they may resent you for it. But people sort of need to have their hand held and be told, you know, what's going on, so that they can then immerse themselves in the movie and then be surprised by all of the crazy stuff, that unpredictable stuff that happens. But I think if you just kind of like throw someone into something and it's jarring, it takes them a while to get hold of things, and then you're 20 minutes into the movie and now they're invested in it, but you've lost them in some way. So I think it's not a bad thing to just, you know, sometimes you feel like, man, I don't want to insult the audience's intelligence, but you're not doing that. I mean, there's a basic contract between the filmmaker and the audience to you know, share in this an understanding about what's going on, and then you can do whatever you want. You know?
Absolutely. Now, what's the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Oh boy, I think that I was probably in my early 30s when I thought, and that's, you know, it's not a coincidence that that's really when my career started to take off, where I accepted that I didn't know everything. I remember saying to myself, oh my God, I didn't know anything until this point. Like, why wasn't that obvious? You know, that right. You know, sort of like a friend of mine has a joke that's I'm paraphrasing is, you know, every corny thing that every motherfucker in their 40s tells you is true.
Yeah, amen.
You come to realize that is true.
Yep.
And that they're right, and you can't hear it until you're ready to hear it. But you go, oh yeah, you know, it's true. You know, you won't understand this until you're this age. And so I can tell people that, but the irony is that they probably won't hear or accept me saying it until they've experienced it for themselves. And it may happen for you at 27 or 33 or 40, but
or 50
or 50, you know. So it's just good to, in as much as you can, keep an open mind and be ready to learn, and that you're kind of, as a creative person, always working. When you're walking down the street, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're thinking about things in a creative way. And anything you see walking down the street or in the supermarket is something that you could use in a script potentially, or something that you could, inspires you to go and create something, or gives you an idea to see someone and use something in a performance, just be open, to not only what people say or ideas, but just to the possibility of everything. It's kind of like, being vulnerable and available at all times.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Which is difficult because you open yourself up to being hurt, especially in the business.
You got to do it, but you got to do it.
But you got to do it.
Now, what's one of your favorite films of all time?
My favorite film of all time is The King of Comedy.
Yeah,
by
not a bad one.
Scorsese, and it's an odd movie that, maybe 2001: A Space Odyssey is a better movie, or Citizen Kane is a better movie, but it's my favorite. It has a tone where it's, this movie took a long time for people to really appreciate it. I've always loved it, but since it came out, but it is as funny as it is chilling. It is completely, it predicted everything that's going on now. It's about society and, people's bad behavior, causing them to become celebrities. It's like every year it's more Russian, Now we have a president who's an asshole, reality television star. Yeah. He's the president of the United States. This is just the guy who gets his own TV show because he's a psycho. I think that movie was probably influenced a lot of what the sort of tone I was trying to go for with Take Me, because it's unique. There's really no other movie like it. And, maybe, going for a movie that was neither critically or commercially successful when it came out is not the smartest thing to do. But
I want to go for Ishtar. I really think Ishtar.
Yeah. It's like 30 years later, people like Ishtar and people like The King of Comedy, and they appreciate them. But
Howard the Duck.
I guess that's just the way that I am. I have this joke I tell people, cast me in your movie if you want everyone to like it, 5 or 10 years from now. Because I'm in these cult movies where it's like, whether it's the big movies I'm in or the little movies, that they take a while to catch on, and
They age well.
Yeah, I think, financial success and critical success is not the arbiter of what makes a good movie. The only true test of a movie is time. These movies over time are still around. It's like why people are still listening to the Beatles, or why people are still listening to Mozart and Beethoven. That they are great. And there are other things that were probably hugely successful and everyone loved that, won Best Picture or were the top movie of the year that no one sees or likes or watches anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we can't, Van Gogh the benefit from his, success. But I think that if you can live a good life and, try to do what you want to do, maybe it won't bring you personal happiness. Everyone loves it after you're gone or after it's too late to really benefit from it. But that's just art. I can only make what I am inspired to do and what inspires me. And if those are going to be things that people are only going to appreciate years from now, and then so be it. I make a decent living now, and I have a good quality of life, and I get to love what I do, and I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud of this. And it's going to be on Netflix, and that's when everyone will see it. I mean, many people have seen it now.
And then Take Me will be on Netflix. Hopefully, sometime.
I think in July. I mean, watch it now. I don't know when this is going to air, but it's on Amazon. You can rent it on Amazon. You can rent it on iTunes. Sure. You can rent it on Google Play and YouTube. And and all those digital VOD platforms. Yeah.
Very cool, man. Thank you so much, Pat, for being on the show. It was an absolute pleasure.
Alex, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
You got to admire Pat for his just hustle over the course of his career. And, he's the definition of someone who loves the grind of the day in, day out of being an actor and now being a director. And that has paid off for him in a big, big way because he's been able to do what he loves to do and make a living doing it. And at the end of the day, that is the goal. That is the dream for any artist, any filmmaker out there. So I hope you take some inspiration from Pat Healy's story and definitely check out Take Me. It's available on Netflix right now and also available on Amazon and Google Play for rental. But if you want to watch it on Netflix, definitely check it out. Really, really fun movie. And speaking of amazing indie films, you guys know that Friday, This Is Meg will finally get released on iTunes. So all of the tribe can finally see it. Please head over to thisismeg.com/iTunes and just buy it, please. If you guys love me at all, just buy it. And if you're there, once you watch the movie, please leave us a review on iTunes. It's going to be huge for us to get a lot of hopefully good reviews on iTunes to help us up in the rankings and see if we can actually crack iTunes, if we can break iTunes, or we can hack iTunes in one way, shape, or form by getting as many sales as humanly possible. So thank you again so much. I will report back on what happened with our iTunes launch and continue to report on my experience with Distributor and getting out the film throughout all of these VOD, SVOD platforms and TVOD platforms as well, and let you know what happens. So if you want to get links for anything we talked about in this episode, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/172 for the show notes. And as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.